Stop the insanity. Get focused on what really matters in life. Your faith, your family, your finances, and your future. Now sit back and change the trajectory of your life. This is Money for Life, brought to you by the 100-Year Savings Solution. Are you concerned about the markets? Stop taking unnecessary risks with your money while also getting great benefits. Visit us at 100yearsavings.com. Now, let's welcome your Money for Life hosts, Teresa Kuhn and Rick Sapio.
Welcome to Money for Life. Today, I'm excited to speak with Tersh Blissett, and he is the owner of Service Emperor and also the podcast master host for Service Business Mastery. Tersh and I met because my family owns a heating and air conditioning company, a service company, which many of you might know or remember. It's a business that we started as an alternative to my son's college education. He wanted to study business, and I thought, there's no way we're going to spend all that money in investment for him to learn business in college when you learn business by doing business. So Tersh and I met in our service business coaching program. Excited to have you on Money for Life, Tersh.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, this is great. So you've been quite the entrepreneur and quite the leader in terms of serving in the community and training others. And you've operated your business so differently than the traditional service business owner. For those who don't know, let's define what a service business is.
So basically, a service business is anybody that crosses the threshold of a house. It's the easiest way to describe it. Your HVAC, your air conditioning, plumbing, electrical, your garage door, even landscape and that type of stuff can be classified as a service-based business.
And how'd you get involved in the business?
By mistake, almost. After I got out of the Air Force, I worked with my father for a little bit and in a factory. He really was pushing me towards working with my hands in the trades. I've always been into cars a lot. He knew that I'd be really good working with my hands, but he actually pushed me towards electrical. One of his best friends at the time had an electrical company, and he said, you should go be a helper for him and really do that. And I wasn't really excited about that. I really didn't want to get shocked, is more of anything, but it was really one of those things where a friend of mine, he worked for an air conditioning company, and I was like, you know what? Let me just give this a try. Can you get me a job? And he did. He got me a job with that company, and I slowly worked my way up to the top. And I was the service manager and GM there, and then eventually started my first HVAC company, then second, and then purchased a third.
Why did you own multiple companies? Like you had one, you started, you built it, you sold it, you started another one?
Well, it's funny. The first one I started just because I was kind of capped out where I was located while I was GM. I would consider myself a wartime leader. And so when things started running really smooth, I just got bored. And that's whenever I started my first one. And then the second one was really a culmination of, I had a friend of mine who owned a construction company, and they did a lot of turns and flips of property management, houses and apartments, but he didn't have anybody that did air conditioning. So we took the business that I had and the business he had and combined the two together. And that's the second business that I had. And it's called TriStar Heating, Air and Plumbing. We still own it. I own 50% of that. And that business is very high volume and the margins are a little tighter. So it's one of those businesses where our service experts, they have to go 10, 12 service calls a day because it's just a lower dollar amount received on the job. And I started my podcast about 2017. And when I started it, a lot of people were asking me about starting a business because the business that we had, TriStar, it was growing between 90 and 120% year over year for about 4 years straight there. And so when I started the podcast, when people were asking me about it, I said, you know what, let me just start another business. And that is what happened. In 2018, I purchased a business that was in pretty bad shape. Then we've turned it around. We spent all of 2019 really turning it around. And then 2020, we rebranded over to Service Emperor. And that business, while they're in the same market, they are kind of competitors, but not really competitors because the avatar for Service Emperor is very much a higher margin with a lower volume. So our service experts are catching 4 service calls a day rather than 10 or 12.
And it's a very high touch, service oriented experience for the consumer, for your customers, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We spend a lot of time cultivating relationships with the clients with Service Emperor, and we're really technology driven also. So service before and after the sales is just as important as while we're in the home.
So I'm sure our listeners are wondering, how did you grow a business with tight margins over 100% year over year for 4 years in a row?
Yeah, that's a good question. And volume, that's how we did. And the thing about it is once you learn the niche of dealing with property management and apartment complexes and that type of stuff, there are a lot of those properties that really need a good company that will stand behind them, but also understand how they work. So you're not going to get paid immediately. You're not going to get paid in 2 weeks or 30 days. A lot of times it's going to be 60 or 90 days before you get paid. You have to have certified payroll in certain situations there also. And what happens is a lot of these apartment complexes and property management companies, they have to deal with a one-man shop or people who are like kind of fly by night because of the margins. And a lot of your quote unquote reputable companies, your larger companies that are used to dealing with providing major service or value to their service, they don't really want to deal with a property management company that is always going to ask them about the price. And once you've figured that portion of it out, and you're going to become high demand amongst the word travels along with all of the other property managers and the apartment complexes. And eventually we got to where we were up around like 6,000, 6,500 properties that we were managing between the plumbing, electrical, HVAC, the painting, flooring. I mean, literally, whenever somebody moves out of an apartment, we would go in and do all of the work to get that apartment ready to go again. And then at night, whenever somebody called in, we were on call and would go take care of their air conditioning and heating, which the great part about that target demographic is that the demand's always there because the renter doesn't care if it's going to cost extra money. They get home, the air conditioner doesn't work, they're calling, they want somebody to come out there. And we come out there. There's no like, let's open a window. I'm paying rent, so therefore I want my air conditioning to work. So they're going to call in. So that means that we had consistent work all year long, which was great.
And in the service industry, that's so important. What some people may not know in the HVAC business, and HVAC stands for heating and air, by the way. And in Austin, Texas, where I'm from, we call it air conditioning or cooling and heating because our winters aren't so bad. Although I can't say that this year because we had a different year this year. But there are shoulder months for these companies. They're really, really busy seasons. And then there are months where there's not a whole lot of business because the weather is mild and the units aren't stressed as much, where they require as much repair, et cetera. But you figured out a business model with the plumbing and with the electrical and the paint and everything else where you had business consistently. This is a message from our sponsor, the 100-Year Savings Solution. Rick and I do these podcasts because we want to impact people's lives in 4 areas: their faith, their family, their finances, and their future. And with a 100-Year Savings Solution, it gives you more options to live a better life in those 4 areas. It is a specially designed whole life insurance policy that gives you more for your money than you'll ever get from a bank, a CD, or the traditional savings solution. Go to 100yearsavings.com to learn more. So from a business model perspective, is that something that you would recommend to others if they're looking to expand or niche, become a business that's really specific to client? You call them clients, some people call them customers, versus the high volume business?
It's not a difficult niche to get into. What it is a difficult niche to wrap your head around. So if you're normally going to bill out, let's call it flat rates. I'm not sure how familiar the audience is with flat rate, but we always bill out flat rate. That's kind of how we try to do things. That way it's a very consistent billing process. And if you're used to billing out $250, $300 an hour flat rate, and you want to go after this market, you're either going to have to cut your hours way back, or you're going to have to cut your billable hour dollar amount down. And you have to be very efficient with everything that you do. You can't accidentally over purchase for a job. Like you just really have to look at your numbers. And if you're okay with doing that, I see no problem at all with trying to go that direction. Now, there are certain things that I offer with Service Emperor that I cannot offer with TriStar, like service after the sale. If someone purchases an HVAC system or an air conditioning system that is over $5,000, immediately our system triggers to send out an alert to a mobile masseuse. Her name's Mary. And Mary goes and gets in contact with the homeowner and sets up a time for her to come out to the person's house and provide a mobile massage. And it's one of our ways of just kind of help de-stressing during a stressful situation. We can't provide stuff like that to clients with TriStar because there's no margin there. There's not enough margin to have that buffer to be able to provide that client quote unquote experience. But we still make good money, just a little bit different way of thinking of business whenever it comes to that. And you can do it within the same business, but just it has to have very clear boundaries. That's going to be the biggest thing. Is we both know that mindset is a very big thing. When in our coaching organization, we learn about mindset, and the service expert's mindset in one scenario and the service experts or service technicians mindset in a different scenario, they're going to be completely different. Whereas one is going to be offer. The other one is fix only the repairs that are needed, like do the bare minimum because this is owned by someone. The person that's paying for this is not the person living here. And so they just have to understand, they have to be able to turn it on and turn it off, or that you're going to have specific technicians who only go on these jobs and specific technicians who only go on these jobs.
So not only are you running two service businesses, which one is challenging enough, you do it remotely.
We do. Yeah. So we're 100% remote. Now, TriStar does have a warehouse because of the paint and carpet that requires a warehouse because it comes straight from the manufacturer, all of that stuff. But Service Emperor has always been remote from day one. We've been remote and virtual. And it's one of those things that we've been extremely deliberate about from day one. And it was almost something that bred from TriStar because I was driving to an office and I was like, man, I don't really need to be here. And I have an office that I'm taking up space, but it's just so that I can say I'm at the office. And there's no real reason for me to be here because I don't have to physically touch any of the products. Well, I don't have to do any of this stuff. And we have all of our information in the cloud already. We're using QuickBooks Online and our CRM's in the cloud. So why do I need to drive into the office, waste the gas, waste the mileage on the vehicles and all of that other than culture? So that's the big red flag that gets thrown up is how do you maintain culture? So then I spent a very long period of time, I say a long period of time, 6 months of really deep thinking about how to create culture with us not being together. And what I've basically figured out, and it's not perfect, like we're constantly trying to adjust this and update it, but it's basically constant and steady communication across the whole group of people. And 4 times a day, we check in with everybody in the company, asking how they are, what's their momentum, are they good? We use a red, green, and yellow light analogy. And I just basically send out a text message with that emoji, the red light emoji, and ask how they're doing. Then they send back a green. Then we just keep going. We don't even really acknowledge it. We acknowledge it, but we don't stop what we're doing. If we get a yellow, I'm going to send a text message to the person and say, hey, what's going on? Is there anything I can help with? If it's a red, even if I'm in a meeting, like if a red came in right now, I would kind of stop what I'm doing and I'd go and call them because a red is going to be something that's going to either cost us money or it's going to be safety related. So they don't feel safe. There's a money situation going on here, or it's going to basically damage us because that person's potentially going to leave. And so like red's bad. And so if they're like, sometimes you'll get like a green yellow because I have a headache or a migraine or something like that. And sometimes you'll have a yellow red, like I'm at yellow, but I'm teetering towards red. And so then you kind of can feel everything out. And you do that 4 times a day. You don't typically have the technician or the CSR that kind of flies off the handle because if they've progressively gotten worse through the day, you've watched it happen, or either like they went from green to red because they stumped their toe or something like that. It's not like a serious problem within the culture of the business because you're monitoring it all day, every single day. But that's just one little thing that we've done, but we do stuff like that all the time.
How many employees do you have?
We are constantly hiring, and we have several people who are getting ready to start, and we've been doing tons of interviews here lately, and we have tons of people who are qualified to start. So yeah, it does change quite often here.
Well, that's really exciting. You know, culture is so tricky, especially remote. I've worked remote pretty much my entire business life. And the word culture, if you break down words, I love breaking down words. Cult is the first part of culture. And why do people get attracted to a cult? Because it's a community, it's a family, it's a feeling that they belong, they're loved, they're cared for. And working remote, especially in service, it is high stress when you've got a customer or a client and they are in pain and they are stressed out. you've got a service expert who needs to go out there to service that need, or you've got a customer service person that needs to deal with a stressed out customer, everybody in that equation has to be on their best and feel loved and appreciated enough to serve the person, the customer. Hats off to you. My business that is completely remote, and I absolutely love it, because I'll tell you, when I think of the hours, the days, the years I've saved, not waking up and having to get dressed, put on a face, do my hair, commute in traffic, go to an office, and turn around and do everything back, and then settle in my home. Tersh, I've saved years out of my life, right? And you know what? It made me so much more productive because I could just plug right into work, literally from my bed to my office, and my whole team is remote. And I've attracted just amazing team players because people love, not everybody, I shouldn't say that. A lot of people love working remote.
Yeah, some people need that interaction, that touch. And one of the ways that we kind of helped out combat that sense of camaraderie and really just making sure that we're not zombies. We never come out of our pajamas. It's very, very easy to get into a state of depression by doing that. Like, you can just never leave your house because you leave work and you go to bed, you wake up and you go to your office and you go back to bed. And so one of the ways that we kind of help combat that is we keep Zoom open all the time. So we have everybody stays on a Zoom. Anybody that's off, quote unquote, office people, they stay on a Zoom. And if you need any help with anything, you just unmute, or you can type in the chat bar. Most of the times you just unmute. If they could see that I'm on this podcast, they wouldn't just unmute and start talking. They would just message in the chat bar and say, hey, I have a quick question. And then they, as soon as they're acknowledged, they unmute and then just ask their question. And so it's like we're kind of sitting in cubicles next to each other without physically being right next to each other. So we have people who have recently applied for a position here for inside sales that some's in Michigan and Syracuse, New York, even out west. And we're based in Savannah, Georgia. And those positions can be completely filled by those individuals without them having to relocate to Savannah.
Fantastic. Well, I want to continue that conversation offline with you. But for today, because that's fantastic. I have employees all over the country, but my other business, it works so easy. And it's my blind spot that makes me think, oh, with service, it's a lot tougher. But I want to continue for our listeners, talk about, you're like a master at automating processes and systems. Tell us about that.
We do a lot of automation. So I am kind of an automation junkie. I went to an event and spoke with Ari Meisel, and he wrote a book called The Replaceable Founder, and basically how you become replaceable as the founder of your business. And most of that's through some sort of automation or usage of a VA. And VAs are so underutilized right now. And especially with people who are out of work due to the virus, the pandemic and everything that's going on around us, they can't go into work physically. And so there's a lot of people who are laid off, but would be perfect at being a VA. They're just not used to being a virtual assistant. They're used to being an in-person assistant. And so using a VA is not really automation, although that's kind of cheating, but that is very much like, I don't have to do it type stuff. But whenever it comes to a process, if there is anything that's kind of like mule work, something that's monotonous and I don't really want to do this, but I have to do it repeatedly, it's our goal to get rid of that task. And one of the ways that we get rid of tasks like that is by automating them. And we'll use programs like Zapier. And if it's for social media posts, it might be something like Buffer, or, there's tons of social media automation posting platforms out there. And we can pull information from our CRM. As soon as the service call is closed, it gets pulled out via Zapier, and it can go into something like MailChimp, and then all of a sudden create an email funnel for those people to constantly follow back up with them. And that way we can do more with less people in the office, less staff on staff. And they're still getting that same touch as if someone's manually putting all these emails together and type them out and send them to people.
So have you worked with an automation expert? Is there anybody out there? Because you say that, like, a lot of people like myself love the concept. Some of our stuff is automated. I'm always looking for someone to come in and tweak. I don't want to be involved in it. I don't want my team members involved with it. But I want somebody to come in and just tweak and say, hey, automate this, automate that. Is that who you work with? Someone like that? Or are you the one?
I've the one that's kind of nerded out and did it myself. There are definitely people out there, especially if you get into a Facebook group like the Zapier Facebook groups and stuff like that. People are in that group that know way more about Zapier than I do. I usually get in those groups so that I can learn about it, but people in those groups that are for hire as well. And that's what I would recommend if you don't know much about automation, because you will have your mind blown with the amount of things that you do throughout the day that could be automated. And even if it's something as simple as setting up rules within your Outlook. So there's certain things that I just don't need to see the email, but if I can't unsubscribe to it, or I can't like just delete it as soon as it comes in, I do need the email eventually just for some sort of record. Just go in, spend time, create the rule. Create one rule where if this email comes in and there's like, this is in the subject line or this is in the content, send it to this folder. And I never see those emails again. They're there. I know they're there if I need them, but I don't need to see them every single time they come in my inbox. Same with like, there's certain like really cool tips that we get. They're just funny stuff like that I've subscribed to, and I don't want to delete them, but they kind of junk up my inbox. And so I just, a quick rule inside of Outlook, and Google Gmail does the exact same thing. And then all of a sudden that person's or that company's emails all go to this other folder. So like our CRM sends me a notification every time something happens as far as someone's dispatched. Well, I don't really need to see those notifications all the time, but I do need other notifications. So I don't want to unsubscribe to it. So all of those CRMs notifications that have anything to do with dispatch are going automatically into a folder, and I never see it. And taking the time to set it up initially, that takes a little bit of time. But once you've done that, you don't have to deal with it anymore. Like your checking account, something as simple as your automatically paying your bills, setting up your bill pay. It takes a few minutes up front, but once you've done it, now every month, these things are automated and you don't really have to worry about it anymore. I mean, obviously you have to worry and make sure there's money in the account, but you don't have to worry about paying the actual bill. So stuff like that is just, if I do something that I don't want to do, or if I do something that is not something that I enjoy doing, I'm going to try and get a VA to do it, or I'm going to try and automate it. That's just how it goes.
Tersh, you mentioned something about virtual hiring events. Let's talk about that, because for some people, we're not talking about remotely interviewing. We're talking about having an event online where you are interviewing candidates on a Zoom call, and they all know that they're competing for the position.
Absolutely. It is really fun. The more you do it, the more fun it becomes, honestly.
Fun for you.
It's fun for me. It's not so much fun for them. I mean, it does. Before the end of the call, I don't recall anybody saying that they didn't enjoy the interview. Whenever we first come on, we do it 2 times a week. We'll do it every Wednesday and Thursday afternoon, unless I have something booked already. My calendar is automated. It's another automation feature. As soon as it comes from Indeed, it automatically creates a Zoom link, which is available or not available based on my calendar. So my calendar can tell them if it's open or not. And they get on. If it's one starts at 4:30, the other starts at 5. So at 4:30, I always send a text message to the group or a chat saying, just 1 second, I'm getting final preparations ready for us to talk. And what I'm really doing is I'm waiting for about 3 minutes for everybody to get into the waiting room. And so they're in the waiting room, not realizing they're in the waiting room with possibly 10, 15 other people. It maxes out at 20 people per interview. That's when it stops. But they're sitting in the waiting room, and then all of a sudden, Julie, my wife, she is in her office, and we're both waiting on that 3 to 4 minutes, maybe 5. I try not to wait more than 5 minutes, and then I'll admit everybody at once. And the look on everybody's face when they come in, they're like, what's going on here? And they see, like, I have a full podcast set up here because of doing podcasts. Some of the people have said, I thought I was getting like punked or like pranked, like one of my friends was setting me up for this or something like that. The first interview, it's going to have every position that we're possibly hiring for. So it could be a inside salesperson, outside sales comfort specialist. It could be an HVAC guy. It could be a plumbing gal. It could be somebody who has no experience that wants to be an apprentice. It could be somebody who wants to be a manager. I mean, literally, it could be anything. And whenever we first come on, we say, hey, look, basically just exactly what I said. Everybody here that's being interviewed, not necessarily you're being interviewed for the exact same position. We're here to learn about you, and we want to know about you. And that's our goal. And if we mesh together, then we'll talk again on a different interview. But each person will go round robin. I think once, maybe twice, we've only had one person show up. And that one, it's not as fun. It turns more into a legit, like sitting in front of you interview process. And it's less about how awkward things feel and how you react in an awkward situation. And that's my whole goal, is to see how you're going to act whenever things are awkward. And whenever I'm speaking to them, I always ask two questions that are pretty much surrounded, like, tell me about your background, what's your work history, what you've done in the past, that type of stuff. And then the second two questions, I only ask 4 questions to each person too, because I really try to respect their time. I tell them it's going to take an hour, and we're going to stop at an hour. So we stop at 5:30 on Wednesdays and we stop at 6 on Thursdays, and that's Eastern time. And so then I'll say the second 2 questions. The first one is, what makes you stand out in the crowd? So there's 10 people on this call. Imagine the other 9 of them are applying for the exact same position that you're applying for. What makes you better than the other 9 people on this call? So then you can tell the people who are like, oh, I don't want to talk bad about anybody. So then they're like, I really am a nice person. Like, I don't want to be bad mouthing anybody and stuff like that. And then you have another person who just straight goes for the jugular. It's funny to watch those individuals. It's funny to watch everybody, honestly. And it's not just for humor on my part. It's really just to see how they act in a situation when a homeowner starts giving them grief, or when they're in a stressful situation, like, what's going to happen here? But then the last question that throws everybody off is, what's your childhood smell like? When you think back about your childhood, what's the first smell that comes to mind? And people are like, what? Anything you could think of, we've probably heard when I ask that question. And the first person is always the worst for the first person, because they don't get to think about it. The last person, the 20th person that's in there, they've heard 19 other people tell it. So they're prepared for that question. But that first person, I always try my best to pick whoever has their camera turned off, because that's another thing. Whenever they first come on, we're like, hey, turn your camera on, make sure your name's the right, so pronounce your name right. And I'm horrible at pronouncing names. And with my name being Tersh and having a weird name, I should be a lot better at pronouncing people's name, but I'm not. So I almost make a joke about it. Like, I just butcher names completely. So just make everybody feel comfortable. And they also recognize that that's how we are all the time, because we're not physically touching each other. We have to have camaraderie. And so by the time the calls are over, there's people who will stay afterwards. They're like, hey, I just wanted to say, like, this was a really great experience. I was very surprised when I started out, and I thought that it was a joke, or I thought you weren't going to take me serious and stuff like that. Or I shouldn't take you serious. But come to find out, you're just those type of people. And like, we've had feedback where they've said, yeah, I've been following you on Facebook for a while. I watched you as you transitioned from Icebound to Service Emperor. And I'm like, wow, like, you're stalking us. Like, what's going on here? And they're like, well, we just see how much fun you have, because quarterly we will get together as the team here at our property, because we live on 250 acres, and we'll have the whole team come here, since we don't see each other all the time. And we'll do things like we rented a 250-foot slip and slide, like blow up bouncy house type thing. And all of everybody's family came, and kids were playing out there, and we just do stuff like that all the time. And they're like, we see that on Facebook, and we see those pictures, and you had Low Country Boil and everything. And I just want to be a part of that. I want to have fun with the people that I work with too. And so it's just another thing to add to culture as well.
So you're flying people in from all over the country?
Yeah. We'll do that typically once a year for a big party, but I mean, it's always going to be like when people don't expect it. It would be like maybe a Valentine's Day party and just extravaganza. And Christmas, we just won't even act like Christmas happened. Same with, we always celebrate 4th of July. Julie and I both are vets, so we'll celebrate that, but we'll take a random holiday and turn it into a big shindig.
The interview process is just one of those human experiences where most people just don't enjoy the process per se, because if they're looking for a job, it's typically because they either need a job, want to change, a little bit of a stressful situation. It's like dating. It just brings up all the insecurities that we have, right? Am I going to be liked? Am I going to give the right answers? Like, it's a common human experience that people feel uncomfortable with.
Absolutely.
And you've positioned it in a way to make it heightened, like a surprise. I don't know if you've ever been to, I remember, I think in college or something, I went on some job interview It was a sales job, and I showed up and it was in a room with a bunch of other people. So it's the same exact experience, except you're in Zoom and people aren't expecting it, especially when you're talking about service experts, technicians, plumbers, electricians, service people. So fascinating.
We've had people drop off before, like kind of self-regulate themselves. And, at first I was okay with it because I was like, you know what? They got rid of themselves before coming on board because they knew they were underqualified. After thinking about it for a while, I really got into like, all right, I don't want to lose a person who has a great personality and they might not be perfect for that job, but they might be perfect somewhere else in the organization because they're uncomfortable here. That's why in the beginning, I will always say, look, you're not all fighting for the same exact position. That way they'll stay on board for the whole interview.
You're doing this twice a week, but your current team is only 12.
Oh, we have so many people who are way overqualified. So like our hiring pool is massive right now. Like as soon as the workflow picks up, they're ready to come on board and they're constantly emailing saying, hey, I had so much fun on your hiring interview. I imagine that's how it is to work there. So like when we'll tell them, we aren't hiring at this time, but as soon as we're hiring, you're at the top of the list, that type of conversation.
Do you do a follow-up interview with the people that you like, or you just... You do. Okay. So even though you're not hiring right away, you go to the second step. Okay.
Yeah. And we actually have a third step and a fourth step and a fifth step too. The fifth step is we actually have a meal together, which is difficult if you live on the other side of the country. So we'll have a virtual meal, but most of the times we can have a meal in person together with their family.
Tersh, you are a very unique individual, just like your name. You're a very unique thinker. I absolutely loved our time together today. And I think you've brought so much value to our Money for Life community. And let people know how they can follow you.
First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. It's such a pleasure of mine to come and share. Anybody, they can get in touch with me. I'm on social media. It's at Tersh Blissett. That's my @ or reach out to me via email, tersh@serviceemperor.com. You'll see an automated auto response that says I only check my emails twice a day. And I do check them twice a day, sometimes more often than that, but I will get back to you as soon as possible. But just another way that I limit expectations by automating.
Wow. You are a pleasure. And I've learned so much from you over the years. And today was really great. So I appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you so much again for letting me come on the show.
You are welcome.
You have just experienced the Money for Life podcast, brought to you by the 100-Year Savings Solution. Implement these strategies today and create a life by design. For more information, visit 100yearsavings.com. Have a blessed day.